Welcome to Coffee with Viking. I am Mike. Cheers. Chaos in the worship service. 1 Corinthians 11:17. It sounds as if more harm than good is done when you meet together. Worship services have gotten out of hand. And in most churches today, especially the mega churches, you will see that. People at Corinth are apparently arguing about the following: worship fashions. Paul tells men to take off their hats, but he tells women to wear their head coverings. He's apparently working within the cultural rules of the day. For example, women who took off their head scarves in public were often considered immodest. Apparently, some women in church are doing this when they pray and prophesy, perhaps to get more comfortable. Communion versus potluck. The Lord's Supper at Corinth resembles a church potluck more than communion. And there is a difference. A potluck is just a gathering after a church service. As a kid, we used to have plenty of those in the church I grew up in. And a communion is the remembrance of Christ in his broken body and his blood when he went to the cross and gave his life for our sins. So doing a potluck and calling it a communion is highly disrespectful. The Lord's Supper at Corinth resembles a church potluck more than communion, but this potluck doesn't involve much sharing. It's bring your own food. So the rich bring a lot and sometimes get drunk, and the poor bring what little they have. Paul calls this disgraceful, and it very much is. For now, he tells them to eat their meals at home. He says he'll give them instructions about how to properly celebrate communion next time he comes to town. Speaking in tongues, and this one is a big argument amongst many different denominations, not just in the people in Corinth. Paul doesn't want this practice to take over a service. He limits each service to 2 or 3 people speaking in tongues, talking one at a time, and he doesn't want anyone to talk in heavenly languages unless there's someone to interpret. Otherwise, they must be silent in the church meeting and speak in tongues to God privately. And that'll be in 1 Corinthians 14:28. 1 Corinthians 14:27 and 28. If any man speak in an unknown tongue, let it be by 2, or at the most by 3, and that by course, and let one interpret. But if there be no interpreter, let him keep silence in the church, and let him speak to himself and to God. And the last one, women speaking in church. Women should be silent during the church meeting. It is not proper for them to speak. 1 Corinthians 14:34. let your women, 1 Corinthians 14:33 and 34. For God is not the author of confusion, but of peace, as in all churches of the saints. Let your women keep silence in the churches, for it is not permitted unto them to speak, but they are commanded to be under obedience, as also saith the law. This statement is perplexing Paul earlier. This statement is perplexing. Paul earlier said a woman should wear a head covering if she prays or prophesies. Short of sign language, a body can't prophesy in church without speaking. To figure out what Paul is saying about women, Bible experts advise readers to look at the rest of the passage. Paul is also talking about prophecy and the role of men as the head of the house in Roman and Jewish culture. Giving this context, many scholars say Paul is telling women not to publicly question the prophecies of their husbands. If they have any questions, they should ask their husbands at home. And that is in 1 Corinthians 14:35. First Corinthians 14:35. And if they will learn anything, let them ask their husbands at home, for it is a shame for women to speak in the church. I love you all. Stay blessed. Stay caffeinated. And may you all have a wonderful day. Much love.